I wanted to move on to the final topic that we've got on the slate, which is a trend corner that I put here, which is AI and the great race to unify your company's data. And this sort of came to me a couple of months ago. We had Shishir Mehrotra, the founder of Coda and now the CEO of Grammarly, on the show to talk about his vision for the future of AI. And it was very much about the idea that Coda and Grammarly together allow all the different sources of data, the Coda connectors, to sort of go into one big place where AI can make sense of that global context for your company. And then earlier this week, I spoke to the founder of a company called DevRev, potential future guest on this show, which is actually doing something quite similar, right? Which is, they call it conversational AI for your business. And a big part of their secret sauce is actually this sort of integration platform where all the different bits of data, your Salesforce, your Notion, your Jira, everything in your company kind of gets slurped into this, I guess, AI data lake. And then the AI can make sense of it all, can join the dots and can give you really powerful analytics, really powerful customer support, really powerful this and that. And, then I've spoken to other startups who have got these really great ideas, but they're also predicated ultimately on having access to all of a company's data. And so I'm actually seeing this as a bit of a land grab or an oil rush where most B2B companies, most SaaS companies are ultimately going to need to rely on this substrate of data. And so that is the prize. The company that can kind of unify the data at the most companies and own that end to end is going to be the big winner. And ultimately, I imagine these will become platform companies. They will allow other startups to build on top of them, but they will be able to extract a majority of the value, a majority of the rent from this transition. And so, when you see all of these companies that are building products that look like they kind of do a lot of different things, actually, shout back to Rippling and Deal, whatever is going on with their corporate skullduggery, they're also in the game of building these bundles of unified products so that they have access to as much data about your company as possible. That seems to be the game now. It is not the SaaS, it's not the vertical niche, it's the unification of data and then enabling AI to do all sorts of different things with that data. So that's my observation. I was just interested in your two reactions.
It's super exciting because, I see it not just within organizations and the sort of operational efficiency, but it's the operational efficiency of going to, outside industries from tech that have historically been islands away from tech, SMBs in potentially non-tech enabled or non-tech optimized industries that are really sitting on gold mines of data. And the reason it hasn't really been usable in the past is just because it's unstructured. And now we do have these systems that can process unstructured data and generate actionable insights and optimize like really, really cool, simple things like, thinking about an industrial SMB in middle America that can find customers in a way that they've never found before because they can process all of their historical customer records through systems and cross-reference who else is buying in their region outside data systems and then generate a new predictive list of customer leads. Like it's that kind of like really get kind of tactical about like what that actually means. That's a huge thing for not just big tech companies. And it's pretty exciting, I think. And, in terms of this land grab of how it's actually going to be built, we actually are super excited about this as a fund and as investors. We've backed an incredible team that is, building a tool that's very similar to that for, project and program management. Taking in all of your sources from everything from Slack to Jira to emails to your team text messages, as well as your OKRs, and actually building out prioritized systems for different team members and teammates to actually know what to work on, know what they're blocking in a way that humans don't need to do that anymore. Because, as we know, humans need to sleep. We miss meetings. There's context errors, and AI doesn't have that. And so I think it's, a really incredible tool. I think the question from, an organizational system standpoint is definitely, obviously, the blocker is always going to be privacy. I think we know that CEOs love the idea. Privacy teams are probably screaming. And those are the types of the challenges that we're going to have to get through and work through. But at the end of the day, any of your company and work emails, like we talked about earlier, any of your Slack messages, all of that's owned by company anyways.
Yeah, I mean, AI is a powerful mediating layer of everything, right? It's going to be the primary interface for everything, everywhere, all at once. Like you said, Ellie, the reason this becomes much easier now is because uh, AI can deal with unstructured data. The hardest thing was to normalize, dedupe, and structure all this data. And now it's like, oh, you don't need to do any of that shit. Just put it all in one place. It's fine. The AI will figure it out. For the longest time, I've been really passionate about data portability. For this reason, I think it's safe to take credit for popularizing that phrase with the data portability project and pushing for some of the data projects that got popular. I think for exactly this reason, this idea that your data uh, repurposed or gathered into some kind of data pool, data lake, vault is very, very powerful, and you can apply all sorts of applications over the top. For me, I'm much more interested in the consumer side of this than the enterprise side of this. I think there's a massive, massive opportunity for some startup somewhere to create some personal data vault with really granular permissioning and what have you, kind of like this generalized super RAG. um, and I think you combine a generalized super RAG with a generalized super agent that can itself grant partial access to your super RAG to other agents for the purposes of executing operational tasks, is a pretty damn exciting combination of things. And so you know, if it's a startup I'd like to work on, it'd be that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think there's a real opportunity there because Apple doesn't have all your data. They're going to have to ask you to connect to things. Google doesn't have all your data, although that may be a little bit more, but they're going to have to ask you to connect to things. Microsoft doesn't have all your data. OpenAI doesn't have all your data, and certainly as a startup, you don't have access to all your data. There's going to need to be a virtual third party, a neutral third party, not necessarily neutral, but there's going to be some parties that are going to need to be very good at aggregating and normalizing this data and then making it accessible to agents on demand.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Chris, I feel like we talked about this almost a year ago, and almost a year ago, like to the maybe a couple weeks off. But we talked about the potential of this. I think I was circling around that exact thought as well about how exciting it is as like building your own personal agent and the fact that if you plug in all of these sources, the 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 way that it can support you is amazing. I think it is pretty mind blowing that you say Google doesn't have all your data or Apple doesn't have all your data. They have a lot though. And they can do a lot with what they do have. Like, I think what's pretty interesting is that those sort of single sources of data of your own personal history. Let's say I have had my iCloud account for 20 years, 25, 20 years for sure. That's a lot of text message data. That's a lot of family photos. That's a lot of unstructured data that can, think about what I mean, I'm sure there are many, many listeners out there like myself that have iCloud, history that would love to have it structured and organized by an AI that, it's like safe because it's only within your own system. And then similarly with Google, like I've been on Google, Gmail for, yeah, decades. I've been writing professional emails on there for decades. There's no reason why an AI assistant in Google, in your Gemini email writing assistant, shouldn't be able to match your tone of voice or the way that you speak or write. And they haven't yet because they are up against those privacy concerns. And so it does seem like it's some pretty open playing field for a third party application to be able to plug in all of those systems and actually process it because you're just giving it permission to do so.
I actually want to take it back a little bit because Apple and maybe Android, Google through Android has your data through the apps, right? So with Siri search and Siri APIs and app intents and all this kind of stuff,
That's right.
there's no reason why a client-side Siri AI can't access your entire universe of data through your universe of apps. Um, eh, you know, so I think there's a really interesting advantage they have there. But yeah, I still think because of Apple's privacy obsession and their contract with their users, they can't kind of like synchronize and aggregate and host that in the cloud to then give it to other agents. So if you ask Siri, hey, can you book me a flight? Um, it's difficult for Siri to grant access to parts of your data to the flight booking agent. Maybe it can do it through some kind of conversational interface. So the flight booking system doesn't have access to your data. It only gets to ask your Siri questions or something. But to the degree that there needs to be a fit for purpose, cloud-based, granular permissioning personal RAG, I don't think Apple can do that because of their privacy obsession. Google maybe, but I think there is an opportunity for a Switzerland third party to, and maybe an open protocol to make this real.
There's no reason that it shouldn't exist in very short order. Absolutely. I personally would love it.